going out into the section of Kotagiri that's right at the bottom of the driveway here, as well as branching out over here. And we took waypoints at every fence that we came across, the barrier, and took notes about that barrier and took their physical fences as well as their perception of fences in the area and their perception of gore. So the big overarching question that we wanted to partially understand when we did this research is coexistence possible in an urbanizing landscape? And to understand that question, we first have to understand what urbanization is and what coexistence is. So in Kotagiri, the Gaur were part of that nature. And as time went on, people started settling in the area and taking up some of those resources that were provided by the forests, but it still gave room for the Gaur. The Gaur still had their space, they had their resources, and the humans only took part of that. But right now, what we're moving into, and this is very obvious if you walk down and you look at our surroundings, is that there's now by far much more houses and much fewer forests. The forests have been replaced largely by tea plantations, with the exception of small plots of shoal forest that remain true to the trees and the nature that used to be here. This kind of connects to Jackie's project. As you saw, there's increasing questions that are coming up as people start to fill in all the little gaps of space. Waste and water is definitely an issue that we see with resources, and so is being able to live with animals. One thing that's really unique about NVR is that, and the surrounding Nilgiris, is that all these settlements are right next to huge forests. And so that's what kind of brings about these problems of where there used to be so much wildlife, now there's humans, and they're right next to each other. So where is this going to go? We don't know. So moving on, in order to understand this problem, we specifically looked at urbanization, pulling out two factors, and that's fences. Fences coming along with human development as people come in and put up houses. Oftentimes they also put up fences as an extension of their property in order to protect their property. And as well as how that relates to Gaur. So when you put up a fence, that will cause as a barrier to Gaur movement, changing Gaur behavior. While the Gaur may still be able to cross over barriers, their natural flow of how they use the landscape has changed because of the existence of fences. And as Gaur change their movement and their behavior, that will further encourage people to put up fences in order to prevent Gaur from damaging their property. And finally, how do those two factors affect community wellness and community health, as well as the health of Gaur? So moving on to our model. If I could get
No, they want to
yeah. If you guys could just tell us a little bit. So here on this map, we have all the fences that we found in the landscape. In yellow, forests. Here, this dark green, that's eucalyptus forest, which is inside of high fields. And finally, this other green spot is Happy Valley, a little shoulder forest that does not have exotic species of trees. In purple, we have institutions. There are 4 of them: Keystone, Highfield, have potential to really affect the way Gaur use the area, as well as you see that Gaur, despite having so much fences, still very much utilizes space to move through. Especially in the Keystone area, and actually an interesting thing is when they did the mapping of Gaur routes, they only made a straight line through this area because the Gaur, when they come to this area, spread out. They don't stay as a group in this area, but they spread out to all the land surrounding. All right, so moving on. Thank you guys. So we see so many fences here. So we wanted to understand why there were so many fences. Why are people putting up fences? And we found that there's two main reasons, categories of reasons for people putting up fences. One is they're afraid of humans. They put up fences to prevent thieves from coming onto their property. They to give them privacy and to mark the property in order that people don't come and take their property. They don't encroach on their property. And secondly, we found that people are afraid of animals. And this could be wild animals or domestic animals. People who are just and when we asked this question, and further we wanted to understand, so we have all these people that are being for us what people are willing to do something about it. So we asked people about their plans to build fences in the future, and we found that in both categories, owners and realtors, we found that the same proportion of people are planning to build fences, and actually it's only 1/3 of people saying Gore is a problem. So that's kind of interesting because even though we have all these respondents saying, yes, we think that Gore are a problem in this area, only 1/3 of them are planning to put up events in order to prevent Gore from coming onto their property. Okay, so and possibly or potentially damage that property, that there's a much greater cost to them than to people who are just renting the property. And further, we wanted to understand, so we have all these people that are viewing Gore as a problem. What people are willing to do something about it? So we asked people about their plans to build fences in the future, and we found that in both categories, owners and renters, we found that the same proportion of people are planning to build up fences. And actually, it's only 1/3 of people who view Gore as a problem. So that's kind of interesting because even though we have all these respondents saying, yes, we think that Gore are a problem in this area, only 1/3 of them are planning to put up a fence in order to prevent Gore from coming onto their property. Okay, so moving on. In order to look at this data in a spatial way, we created maps like we saw in this model of where the fences are. And we asked them if they actually drive away Gore. First of all, we found that people who lived in cluster housing, the housing that's very close together, are by far less likely to drive away Gore. They're the people that, even if Gore cause threat to them, if they see Gore as a threat to them, if it prevents them from accessing the market or from accessing work, they're less likely to drive away Gore in any way. And we thought that was really interesting, especially when we mapped out the natural resources available in each of their homes, and we found that in many places, the people noted that Gore comes to their property to graze or to drink water, and even though they're coming so close to their property, they're still not willing to drive away the Gore. So we're seeing some sort of tolerance to the animal despite it being their home. And then lastly, we wanted to look at the damage done to fences. So what property damage is occurring now? Because property damage is likely what drives conflict. When an animal causes damage to a property, then the people are more likely to see the animal as a negative thing. And we found that a majority of fences that were put up have been damaged, and further, of those fences that have been damaged, 71% of those fences have been damaged more than once, which shows that this is a recurring problem. So how to move forward from this, understanding that for some people, Gore is a problem, so this coexistence isn't occurring anymore, but for some people it is. We are seeing as populations increase here and as Gore populations also increase, property damage is likely to keep increasing as well. And with that, negative views of Gore are also likely to increase. Right now, there is no policy specifically looking at animals in an urban setting. While there are policies that address elephant corridors or land that's being used for conservation purposes, there's nothing that addresses the specific urban center. So looking forward, we see this as potentially becoming a larger problem, and we encourage that policy ought to start addressing this. Thank you very much. And I would also like to thank Anita, Abhishek, Suman, and everyone else who helped us with this project. Thank you all very much. And Stephen.
Rich, I have a question. When you say owned and rented as the two sets of people whom you interview, do you see a pattern that owned are they the residents of these hills and people who have been here for a longer time, and rented are people who have come from outside and they are passing by? Because it would be interesting to go into more depth there, because is the hypothesis coming that people who have been here for a longer time or local residents of this place, they have not seen this Gaur movement before in their lives, and so they are not being able to adapt to that. People who have come from outside, they have literally a smaller duration of time here, and they see this as something which is part of their lives. How do you see the two sets of people?
I think that's a really great question. Definitely one person's response stands out to me when you ask that question, and that was of someone who had just moved here, and she was very adamant about the fact that the fences on her property were not meant to prevent Gaur from coming, that she really appreciated Gaur, but the fences were meant to prevent people from coming on. So I think that would support what you're saying, is that new people who don't see Gaur on this land as a phenomenon are more likely to be willing to accept them. But I'm not sure how that, I haven't really looked at how that translates across.
The people, most migrants have more tolerance to the animal. What we look at when we look at it, the migrants have more tolerance. The local people who are living here found no problem with the Gaur. And moreover, many people have been seeing Gaur in this landscape. Still, they were localized. They were seeing Gaur only for the last 7, 8 years. So they think Gaur as a problem only when at times when they have some problem, like okay, at night when they go, they have a problem like that. But still, sometimes they also feel like okay, they were not here, they were only found in Cholas. Now the population has increased, so they are coming out. They have an understanding of that.
To put together both of what they said, one thing also I think to keep in mind is the location of the study itself. It's the valley immediately in front of Keystone. So given that there's an interesting proportion of owners versus renters, it's almost somewhere equalish. It would be interesting to see how other valleys are also responding, because this could just be an isolated incident in this particular valley. So that I think would be one of the limitations of a study, that it's a really small study area. But I think there are a few indicators which this is pointing out, which I think we could potentially use to continue the study or try to examine a larger area. So one of which is, like you pointed out, the difference in perspective between owners and renters. But it's also, I think, very important to understand here that residents might technically be the renters themselves. There is a possibility that long-time residents here actually might be the people who are still renting property, and that some of the owners are people from outside, from cities, from different locations altogether. So while I know it's a slightly, in terms of numbers, we may not have anything concrete to show, but I think that's definitely something which has to be further broken down and understood. Because there is definitely a difference in opinion between people, and I also think that most residents have said they've seen God within the span of 10 years.
Yeah, definitely. The average was about 7.5 years. It's the first time people saw the stuff. Nothing more than 10. Nothing.
So while everyone is accounting for God as a recent phenomenon around here, one of the other interesting questions to ask would be that it's not like God magically appeared. What has caused the altering in their route? Where what has actually changed for the God to be able to? Because I think it's also really important to understand that God are not grazers. They don't stay in one grassland patch and just eat up and rest. They browse. They keep moving while they eat. So that particular behavior itself, I think, has a lot more indication. It's indicating to quite a bit more that there's something else which has changed ecologically or in terms of land use. And, that's what I think comes out on the model as well in terms of the routes, because the interesting thing is, even though there are fences almost lined up back to back, the birds still finding ways to move through. So it's a question of, is the fence affecting the bird, or is the bird affecting the birds?
So Martin has a question.
Matthew.
Is it to Rachel and Subbu?
Yeah. More than the rented and the owned classification, I think the classification of clusters and individual houses, I think that would be more interesting, whether people see that as safety in numbers or you have very less land anywhere around your house. And so then that doesn't give you any space to say that I will make a fence or not. And people who are living in single houses, for them it might be more, so they might feel more threatened by, they might be having a small vegetable patch or something like that. And so for them the threat is much more real.
Yeah, so actually we looked specifically at that as well. And in this landscape specifically, a majority of the houses are either in cluster or else it's going sticking up by institutions. The few people that we did interview that had a property that was surrounded by a little bit more land, some people definitely expressed that for come onto the property and they're trying to do things to prevent poor from coming onto the property. But then there's other people who had just the same amount of land, and they're and we have seen boar right next to their property, and they didn't see boar as a problem at all. They were not threatened by it at all. So I think I agree that that's exactly what I thought too, but I'm not sure if our interviews and what we have found supported that specifically.
We had about 29 interviews.
Yeah.
Leo has a question here.
Yeah, amongst your response, I think it's mostly urban.
I don't think there's any vegetable cultivation in the area that we studied, other than gardens. And people did say that or come onto their property to eat the vegetables.
So what you mean by land is basically a small piece of land around the houses or something?
Yeah.
Just below
The studies done this year, so between here and Shakti.
The study is above the road, but there used to be a patch, big vegetable patch that was coming up just below the road. It had that, just a year or so back, they had that garden patch all around.
There used to be things small, shallow, big areas. They used to grow lots of combined vegetable. But this we would like to know if the scenario is changing towards the key is increasing.
I think the change in perspective has not been studied at all. Whatever you want to call it, change the scenario or anything. Because number one, Kotagiri is not the only place where you need to concentrate. As you said, there are several other pockets. And the Kotagiri man, say, until about 20 years ago, I had no idea, guards sort of marching all over the town. They used to be only inside town. Ramu is an English name, his other name is Dodu. Dodu is God, okay. So, I mean, I don't know, they say, I think, especially in Badishola area, I believe when tigers were in large number, this menace did not occur. So also in those soils, that's long, they talk of leopards. But now we don't hear of leopards and tigers in such great magnitude. So I think the whole thing requires a scientific study.
Yeah, Tanya and then.
What is the lifespan of the gourd?
It's 20 years.
Good.
Sujit?
Is there any deeper understanding amongst the people you interview beyond damage to property? That why we need to save the gaur, or why we need to save the tiger? Where it fits into, I mean, that it comes out of my property, damages. I mean, that's it. So,
I definitely, we got a lot of responses. Like, I was surprised at the number of responses that we got. That when people said that, Gaur are here because we've taken their resources, we've taken their water and their food, and so now they're coming here because they're hungry and they're thirsty. So there's definitely that understanding that human development does have an impact on animals, and our impact is so great that now they're coming here, and like we shouldn't blame the animal for being here, that they're here because we have forced them to be here.
That was really whatever question, but I think we'll take it all.
I have a question. I love your presentation. If you, as a foreign resident, came back to Kotagiri 5-7 years from now and purchased a plot of land that came to part of the God, how would you go ahead with tolerating or not tolerating this problem? Do you have something to say?
I think that kind of what our thought is that when people put up fences, it kind of prevents the Gaur from using that amount of land. And when the Gaur can't use that amount of land, they'll use other paths. And so as everyone continues to put up fences, it limits the amount of land available to the Gaur, so the Gaur will be more intensely in certain areas. So I would say if I didn't put up a fence and I was able to encourage my neighbors to also not put up fences, that I would hope that that would continue along the lines, and so that no single property would be as intensely used by a Gaur than others.
I have a question. Understand that there is a God problem now. Is there any other problems related to wild animals? Because tomorrow can also be elephants. So is there anything you have looked at other than just Gaur?
We definitely got a lot of other, we asked people like what animals come onto their property, and they definitely listed a lot of other animals like leopards and boar. And sometimes it seemed like these problems were greater than the boar problem, but we specifically looked at the boar. But those issues definitely came out in our interviews of people saying, well, this is a problem too. The boar aren't really that big of a deal.
I don't know if this is, but are the populations of Gaur increasing, or is it just a movement into urban areas?
I think the population is increasing, but also
That's what I was trying to mention, because the local areas that originally tigers and leopards used to.
Another response we got is that because of those laws here, people have, they don't shoot animals as much, because they're not allowed to open hands. And so
usually stones, sticks.
Yes, definitely people do use other things other than fences, but I think fences is like a pretty good indicator of preventing board from coming on to the property on a consistent basis rather than when the boards are unfavorable to you too.
But just to clarify, you don't need 5 cameras.
I'm just asking.
Do you think, now that you have Gaur in this landscape, and like climate change in the next 10, 20, many decades, you probably would see more and more of them.
Yeah.
Do you think there could be a way, if you're looking at coexistence, because that was one of your whole thing, a bit like the internationalization and engagement and sustainability of the economic strategies, do you think we could also look at coexistence strategies and education for people and animals to live together in these kind of setups? That could be something new which is coming up, and we could use or we could understand how people lived with these animals before, and there has been a little gap, and how people who are wanting to be residents of this place, what is their new way of going about it? Something interesting can come out there. What are your thoughts?
I think like one of the things we had to back of our mind as we did this project was thinking about maybe in the future possibly establishing some sort of corridor for the animals to move through and being able to identify exactly where those gore routes are. And preventing like obstructions to those areas so that the corridor can maintain their routes and have people aware of where those are. I think so. Something like that, a combination of education and providing policies that like allow the animal to maintain their roots.
But when you talk about forming a corridor would be technically connecting bits of habitat.
Yeah, so
It's not like that over there.
yeah, so that discussion is an idea we were thinking about right now. In the future, right now, fences are being used to block off animal movement. What if you can use fences to direct animal movement? So if you identify the most common routes which are being used, if you could then put up fences all along that route, which prevents the entry of the animals, potentially prevents the entry of animals into the surrounding bits, but you give them the corridor they need themselves. It just might be a more effective way of thinking about fencing off and protecting. Because it's just an idea. It has to do with
Connecting them to what?
connecting different parts. Like for instance, if God are moving up from behind Royal Bakery down here and moving up here, and if you know that if there comes a time when they decided it was going to be a fixed path, or you'll be able to identify these fixed paths, you, instead of having fences all along the path, if you remove those fences, instead clear the way for them to just fence off everything else. It could potentially decrease the amount of interaction between people and God, because the God is able to go where they need to. And also because they find a way unobstructed. But these are again...
It's like a God highway.
Sorry? Yeah, God highway. But these are ideas which have to be explored a lot more. These are ideas which we were talking about.